"Doctor, I can help your son see again," said the black boy to the racist physician. "Have you ever been so sure you were right, until life proved you were the only one who couldn't see a thing?" This story doesn't begin with a hero. It begins with an arrogant doctor, used to having control over everything. But when his own son was suddenly plunged into darkness without explanation, he found himself facing the only possible help, a 13-year-old black boy, poor, ignored, and far too unlikely to be taken seriously. He rejected him, disrespected him, humiliated him. But what that boy carried wasn't just an answer. It was a lesson that would change everything. This case isn't about medicine. It's about what happens when life forces you to see using tools the eyes can't reach. Humility, listening, humanity. If you've ever judged someone, or if you've ever felt the sting of being judged, if you've had to rethink everything not to lose someone you love, then this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel and come feel what happens when prejudice dissolves and truth finds its way back. Dr. Cole Whitaker was the kind of man who made a room fall silent just by walking in, tall, well-groomed, with a calm yet commanding voice. His eyes, trained to examine retinas and corneas with surgical precision, also held an expression few dared to meet for too long. He was a renowned ophthalmic surgeon, invited to medical conferences, featured in journals, and with a resume so impressive it made residents tremble when they crossed his path in the hospital hallway. There was excellence in everything he touched, except, perhaps, in the subtleties of human connection. He treated patients with impeccable precision, but with a certain coldness. He never said anything openly offensive, but he never hid his discomfort either, especially when he felt people were asking for too much attention. It wasn't hate. It was something more subtle, more deeply rooted, like an invisible filter, a way of seeing the world where not everyone seemed to have the same value. And that way of seeing was about to be challenged. It was supposed to be just a regular weekend, a quick getaway from the city, father and son sharing the road, the window down and the wind messing up Liam's hair in the back seat. He watched everything with that curious gaze kids have when they're still amazed by the little things, trees rushing by, the shapes of clouds. Then, in a split second, a shadow crossed the road. Liam saw it first. "Dad? Look!" Cole didn't answer. He was too focused on the GPS, trying to find the turn he'd missed. By the time he looked up, it was too late. A deer was already in the middle of the road. Cole jerked the wheel, hard. The car skidded, the world spun in slow motion. The screech of brakes. A pounding heart, the slam of metal against guardrail, and the silence that followed. All of it burned into their memory forever. The crash wasn't too violent, but enough to turn the inside of the car into brief chaos. When the vehicle stopped, Cole turned, breathless, and saw his son, a small cut on his forehead, his face pale. But what scared him most was the boy's voice. "Dad? It's all dark. I can't see. Dad, why can't I see?" The scream cut through him, raw panic. Cole tried to calm him down, saying it was just the shock, that it would pass, but the boy's voice was trembling. His whole body was shaking. At the hospital, the tests began. CT scans, MRIs, ophthalmologic, exams. No internal injury. No brain damage, no physical cause for the blindness. Everything was normal, but Liam still couldn't see. And Cole, the man who had always been the one with the answers, was now just a father, with empty hands and a shattered heart. Cole did what any father with resources and connections would do. He pulled every string, called every favor. He reached out to top clinics, and ensured Liam was examined by the country's best specialists. Boy went through comprehensive eye exams, neurological assessments, sensory evaluations. Every result came back flawless. "His ocular structure is perfect, Mr. Whitaker," they said. "There's nothing wrong with his eyes." But in reality, Everything was wrong. Because Liam remained in darkness. He couldn't see a thing. Not light. Not shadows. Nothing. With each new consultation, the same frustration returned. State-of-the-art equipment, detailed reports, and zero answers. Until one doctor, a bit bolder than the rest, suggested something Cole didn't want to hear. There's a possibility this is functional blindness, emotional in origin. Cole froze, took a breath, and replied coldly, "That's nonsense. My son isn't crazy." To him, that explanation was an insult, a lazy way to avoid digging deeper. He dismissed it on the spot, unwilling to even entertain the idea. But deep down, that suggestion shook him more than he wanted to admit, because it hit a blind spot. Not in his son, but in himself. How could a man so rational, so technical, so certain of everything, accept that something invisible, like emotional pain, could have the power to shut down a child's vision? His pride refused to accept it. At least, not yet. Days passed, but the darkness remained, and not just in Liam's eyes. The boy, once full of energy, barely spoke now. He sat for long stretches in the same corner of the living room, his hands in his lap, face turned to nowhere. He didn't ask questions, didn't complain, didn't cry. And that silence hurt Cole more than any diagnosis ever could. Because it was the kind of silence that acts like a mirror, reflecting everything you don't know how to fix. Cole kept going to the hospital, performing surgeries, giving interviews, keeping his reputation intact, but inside, his mind spun in circles, trying to fit together pieces that just wouldn't align. He had faced some of the toughest cases, rare diseases, high-risk surgeries, but nothing made him feel as powerless as that silent boy sitting just a few feet away. There was no scalpel for this, no lens, no laser, no protocol. For the first time, Cole felt the weight of not being enough, and that weight was starting to crack his pride, even if he still pretended everything was under control. In the cold hospital corridors, where footsteps echoed between heart monitors and rushed voices, there was a quiet, familiar presence that almost no one noticed. A 13-year-old black boy named Isaiah always sat in the same blue plastic chair near the dialysis ward entrance. 3 times a week, he came with his grandmother for her treatments. He never complained. He didn't move around much. He never made a scene or asked for anything, but his deep, observant eyes seemed to take in everything around him, with a clarity most adults had long forgotten. Isaiah was skinny, narrow-shouldered, with tightly coiled hair, and skin shaped by sun and experiences far beyond his age. He'd noticed that stern-looking doctor in the crisp white coat who always rushed by, never once noticing Isaiah sitting there. There was something broken behind that doctor's perfect posture. Isaiah couldn't explain it, didn't know the man's name, or the name of the pale boy with the distant eyes he sometimes held by the hand. But Isaiah could read what no one said. Something between them caught his attention. The weight on the father's face, the way the boy seemed, present, and yet not. Isaiah didn't have medical knowledge, no titles, no degrees, no clinical insight, but he knew how to recognize pain. And every time that father and son walked past him, he felt it growing. Isaiah carried something in his chest that many adults had forgotten how to feel. Empathy, and what he was about to do would change everything. It was late afternoon at the hospital. Isaiah, as always, was there. Open notebook on his lap, body still, eyes alert. From the other side of the frosted glass divider, he heard voices. He recognized the tone. It wasn't casual. It was the doctor in the spotless white coat, speaking to someone on the team. There was frustration, weight, exhaustion in his voice. "We've done everything. Tests, scans, perfect images. There's nothing wrong. But he's still blind." Isaiah felt his heart race. The words echoed in his mind like a loop. The boy he saw every week walking beside the doctor. They were talking about him. He was sure of it. When the two of them came out of the room a few minutes later, the air around them felt heavier than the hallway itself. Liam walked slowly, holding his father's hand like he had no strength, or will, left. And in that moment, something inside Isaiah said, "Go. Now." Even without knowing what would come next, he stood up as if his body knew what to do before his mind did. Every step toward that man seemed to stretch longer than it should. When he stopped in front of them, the world seemed to fall silent. Then, with the courage only those who have been deeply dismissed ever know, he spoke. "Doctor, I know how to help your son see again." Cole looked at him startled, almost offended. Liam for the first time turned his face toward the voice. It was just one sentence, but the air between them would never be the same. The silence that followed, Isaiah's words seemed to freeze the hallway in time. Cole blinked a few times, as if trying to process the absurdity of it. A boy, black, wearing a worn-out hoodie, standing firm, saying he knew how to help his son. As if it were some sort of provocation, Cole let out a short, cynical laugh, almost mocking. "Help my son? You?" He looked Isaiah over, dark skin, tattered clothes, and then raised his voice as if wanting everyone to hear. "Tell me, kid, are you a doctor? What exactly are you a specialist in? Got a diploma I'm not seeing?" Isaiah stood his ground, but his cheeks flushed. Cole stepped forward, towering, imposing, the way he did in meetings when he wanted to shut down a debate. "You shouldn't even be here. This isn't the place for that kind of talk, or for people like you." In that moment, the silence was shattered by uncomfortable stares. A nurse slowed her pace. A man in a wheelchair looked away. The discomfort spread like smoke. Liam, until then quiet, clenched his fists. "Dad, stop!" Isaiah didn't flinch. "Doctor, I just know, because it already happened to me. I know what he's feeling, and I know how to get through it." Liam took an instinctive step toward the voice. Cole gripped his shoulder tightly, as if the boy's movement was some kind of threat. "We're leaving. This is a waste of time." But Liam didn't move. "Dad, wait." It was the first time in days the boy had spoken with any clarity. Cole hesitated, then quickly looked back at Isaiah with barely contained disdain. "Listen, kid, I don't know who put that idea in your head, but this isn't something for you to get involved in. What my son isn't fixed with just anyone's opinion." The words hit like slaps. Isaiah pressed his lips together, took a deep breath. He almost spoke, but chose silence instead. He simply looked at Cole, his eyes glassy but his posture steady. "If you change your mind, I'll be happy to help." Cole pulled Liam by the hand and walked away, not once looking back, but the damage was done. That brief encounter would echo for hours, and far beyond. In the car, minutes later, the silence returned. But it felt heavier now. Liam, his hands resting in his lap, murmured, "Dad, who was that boy? He said he could help me. Why did you talk to him like that?" Cole didn't answer right away. The image of the boy standing in the hallway, holding on to his dignity despite being humiliated, still haunted him. He finally replied, curt and cold, "He's nobody. He doesn't know what he's talking about." But even Cole could taste the bitterness in his own words. What he wasn't willing to admit, yet, was that what truly disturbed him wasn't Isaiah's boldness. It was the fact that, for just a moment, he believed him. That night, Cole took longer than usual to fall asleep. He spent long minutes sitting at the edge of the bed, staring into nothing. The house was quiet, but his mind wasn't, and that bothered him more than he'd ever admit. When his wife asked how the day had gone, he replied as always, "Busy." He didn't mention Isaiah. Not the argument in the hallway, not Liam's reaction. He trusted his son would keep silent, as he always did. But the boy's words, his firm posture, the way he didn't back down even after being humiliated, kept playing in his mind like a broken tape. "If you change your mind, I'll be happy to help." The sentence felt written on the walls. It was a gray Tuesday when Cole saw Isaiah again. The boy was in his usual spot, blue plastic chair, backpack on the floor, eyes fixed on nothing. His grandmother was in for dialysis, as always. Cole hesitated for a few seconds at the end of the hallway. He could have turned left and avoided all of it. He had promised himself not to speak to the boy again. But the unease inside him had only grown. His son's voice echoed in his mind from the night before. "Dad, just listen to him, that's all." Each step toward Isaiah made Cole's body tense more. He stopped in front of him, arms crossed, expression cold. "How did you know about my son?" The question came out sharp, like an accusation. Isaiah didn't flinch. "I heard your conversation. I saw you both coming out of the room. I saw it in his face. I know what that is." I recognized the way he walked, the way he didn't look at anything. "The tension between you two." Cole pressed his lips. "Recognized it? And now you think you're some kind of expert because you had a hunch?" he said sarcastically, almost smirking. Isaiah held his gaze. "It's not a hunch, doctor. It's memory," Cole scoffed, already regretting that he'd let it get this far. "Memory doesn't heal anyone. My son needs real treatment." Isaiah took a breath, but kept his tone calm. "I never said I'd cure your son. I said I could help, because I know what it's like to live in a world gone dark. And I know what has to happen for the light to come back. And because today, I help other kids. Not with medicine, with something else." Cole furrowed his brow. He almost turned his back. Almost walked away. Almost ended it right there. But he didn't. Pride still burned in him. But something in the way that dismissed boy, stood there, made him stay. Even if only to prove him wrong. "You don't know anything. But since you're so insistent, go on, what exactly do you think you can do?" Isaiah didn't answer right away. He adjusted his backpack beside his feet and stared at the floor for a moment, as if he needed to rearrange the memories before letting them out. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but low, as if he were speaking more to himself than to anyone else. "When I was 9, my house caught fire in the middle of the night. My mom and I were asleep. I was saved, she wasn't." Cole stayed silent. Inside, his mind was already putting up walls, trying not to be moved. But the boy's voice kept going, steady. I woke up to a loud thud, like something falling. Thought I was dreaming. But then I smelled it. Thick, suffocating, smoke. I got up, and everything was hazy. I could barely see. I started shouting for my mom. The smoke burned my eyes, my throat, my soul. I ran to the hallway and saw just a shadow trying to reach me. It was her, coughing, stumbling, fighting to get to me. Isaiah pressed his lips together. His hand trembled slightly at his side. She pushed open the door to my room, and I remember the way she looked at me, like she was saying everything was going to be okay. But it wasn't. Before she could pull me out, the hallway ceiling collapsed. The smoke swallowed everything, and the last thing I saw were her eyes trying to protect me. After that came the darkness, and it stayed. A woman nearby, waiting in the hallway, stopped fiddling with her phone, no longer able to hide her emotion. Cole kept a serious face, but his hands had lost their steadiness. Isaiah continued. They took me to the hospital. When I woke up, I couldn't see. The doctors said my eyes were intact, but the vision never came back. It was like something inside was blocking it. But to most people, it was just an act, me being dramatic. When I was discharged, they sent me to a shelter. I didn't have anyone else in the city. I spent weeks not understanding anything. I heard voices, smelled coffee, people walking by, but I couldn't see anyone's face. Just darkness, like everything had ended right there. Miss Thelma, a kind woman at the shelter, started sitting with me every day. Not to convince me of anything, just to listen, to let me feel. She told me it was okay to hurt, that crying wasn't weakness, that it wasn't crazy when the body responded to pain with silence. She spoke to me like I was human, whole, even without my sight. Cole stared at the boy, not quite sure where he was going with this. Isaiah went on, and one day, out of nowhere, I saw a sliver of light through the window. Then, the outline of the bed. Later, Miss Thelma's face. Slowly, like the world was coming back, piece by piece. That's when I understood my sight didn't come back because of magic. It came back because I stopped being afraid. Cole looked torn, somewhere between disbelief and discomfort. So you're telling me that is what made you see again? Isaiah nodded, feeling safe again and heard and cared for. That's what cleared the smoke from my eyes, and that's what I try to do today, with other kids at the shelter, whatever struggles they have. Cole took a deep breath, impatient. And your grandmother, where was she in all of this? She lived far from here. She couldn't come right away. By the time she got here, I was already in the shelter being taken care of. She took me in later. She lives with me now, but back then, all I had was that place. And those people. The hallway remained quiet. An older man wiped his eyes discreetly. Cole still didn't know what to say, because for the first time, something inside him had begun to shift. And he didn't know what to do with it. The boy's skin color, his background, still created a barrier Cole wasn't ready to name. Isaiah spoke again, simply, "There's a community center attached to the shelter where I stayed. It's small, but it welcomes kids who've been through tough situations. Every Saturday we meet. We talk. We draw. We play." He paused, calm and direct. "I'm not promising anything. I can only guarantee he won't be judged. And he won't be treated like a case file." Cole took a deep breath, and instead of responding, scanned Isaiah from head to toe. The plain clothes, the dark skin, the way he spoke, clear, unfiltered. Anger rose in him, not at Isaiah, but as a shield against a vulnerability he refused to face. "Look, kid, I don't know what kind of help you're used to offering at that place, but my son isn't like the boys you're trying to save. He has a family, an education, a future." The words sliced through the air. Isaiah didn't respond, but the silence around them did. People nearby looked away, visibly uncomfortable. Cole kept going, whether unaware or uncaring. He doesn't need advice from someone who thinks they understand trauma just because they've been through some tough times. And no, he's not going to sit in some circle with shelter kids drawing rainbows on colored paper. That last line dripped with venom. A certainty Cole was really just trying to prove to himself. Isaiah stood still, his eyes steady, calm. And then he answered, with a quiet voice that pierced through any armor. "You know what the difference is between your son and the kids at the shelter, Doctor? None, except those kids have already been rejected by people like you, and they're still trying to heal." Cole didn't respond. He turned and walked away, quickly, like a man running from something he'd seen, but couldn't admit. In the days that followed, Cole tried to act as if nothing had happened. He buried himself in work, saw patients, reviewed reports. But at home, time stood still. Liam no longer responded to simple questions, didn't ask for anything, barely reacted to anything at all. He sat for hours in the same spot on the couch, shoulders slumped, head down, as if he were slowly fading away. And Cole, though he wouldn't admit it, saw it happening. His wife tried to keep the routine going. She cooked, tried to talk, suggested activities, but the sadness in her eyes said what words couldn't. Until on a humid night, Cole dreamed about the crash again. But this time, the car didn't hit anything. It just kept spinning, endlessly. And in the back seat, Liam was calling out, screaming. But Cole couldn't turn to look at him. He woke up drenched in sweat, breathing heavily. He walked to his son's room, passed by his wife, asleep in the armchair next, to the bed, exhausted. He sat beside Liam, still motionless. Then he heard a quiet, weak but steady voice. "Dad, let him try." And for the first time, Cole didn't have the strength to say no. The next morning, Cole took longer than usual to get ready. Sitting at the table with a cup of coffee gone cold, he stared into space. His son's whispered words from the night before still rang in his head. Let him try. Just 3 words. But they'd torn down a wall it had taken him years to build. For the first time, Cole considered the possibility that controlling everything wouldn't save anyone. He picked up the phone, called the hospital, and asked them to find Isaiah's grandmother's contact information. Stomach in knots, he made the call. The voice on the other end was kind. She said Isaiah would be at the hospital that afternoon, as always, and when he hung up, he felt something strange. Shame. Not for calling, but for how he'd treated the boy. Even so, he left, home with a closed-off expression, as if still needing to convince the world, or himself, that this was just a formality. That afternoon, he saw Isaiah in the same place, and this time it was he who approached. He sat beside him, saying nothing for a few seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than usual. "All right, tell me exactly what you plan to do." Isaiah didn't smile. He just nodded. "I'm not going to do anything alone. He needs you, but in a different way than you're used to." And that was when Cole realized, maybe, for the first time in a very long time, he wasn't in control. And strangely, that didn't seem as terrifying as he'd imagined. The community center sat behind the little shelter church, its walls peeling, its windows letting in more sunlight than Cole's eyes were used to. Just getting there had already been a challenge. He thought about turning back more than once along the way, but Liam walked beside him, silent and awake. Since learning they'd be going, something had changed in his posture. It wasn't excitement. It was quiet hope. Isaiah greeted them at the gate with a shy wave. There were no formalities, just simple gestures. A group of children and teens were gathered in one corner of the courtyard, drawing on large sheets spread across the ground. Others played dominoes, while a volunteer read stories under the shade of a tree. There were no charts, no lab coats, no diagnoses, just attentive eyes and gentle voices. And for the first time in a long while, Liam seemed to let his shoulders drop. Cole stood leaning against the wall, watching everything with a sense of unfamiliarity, as if he were in a place where people spoke a language he didn't understand. But he saw when Liam stepped closer to the other kids, sat down slowly, touched the colored pencils. Then one of the boys started talking to him, without pressure. And then, for the first time in weeks, Cole saw it. A smile. Small, brief, but real. And in that moment, he knew what was happening here didn't fit inside any medical report. In the following weeks, Cole kept bringing Liam to the center, more regularly than he ever expected. He'd sit through the activities, watching without interfering, but with sincere attention. He no longer wore the closed-off expression from the early days. Gradually, he began chatting with volunteers, asking questions, listening to stories. And without even noticing, his clinical gaze started giving way to something he'd nearly lost. Sensitivity. Isaiah remained at the center of it all, with a calm presence that blended firmness and care. He led simple but powerful activities, knew when to give space and when to step in. Each Saturday, Cole watched him with growing respect. Liam had changed too. He talked more, laughed in simple moments. One afternoon during a group conversation, he held his father's hand and said softly but firmly, "I like it here, here. I don't feel weird." Cole didn't respond. He just squeezed his son's hand in return. It happened slowly, as all true things do. On a warm afternoon, in the middle of a game and a laugh, Liam suddenly froze. He held a colored piece in his hands, his fingers trembling. Slightly. He looked toward the light coming through the window, then squinted as if trying to confirm something unbelievable. "Isaiah, is this red?" he whispered. The words trembled, barely brave enough to exist. Time stopped. Isaiah looked at him, confused for a second. Then he looked at the piece. It was red, and Liam's eyes were locked onto it. Silence. Cole, sitting nearby, nearly dropped, the mug in his hands. "Liam, what did you just say?" The boy slowly turned toward his father. "I can see Dad." And for the first time in weeks, his eyes filled with light. Light and tears. "I can see again." Isaiah lowered his head, emotional. A volunteer covered her mouth, unable to hold back the tears. Cole dropped to his knees beside his son, holding his shoulders gently. "Are you sure?" "I am. It's still a little blurry, but it's here. It's coming back." And in that moment, the man who had spent his entire life explaining vision with science cried without understanding, because what he was witnessing didn't fit into any equation. But what disarmed him the most was realizing that this wasn't the most important part. What moved him now wasn't the return of vision. It was the return of his son. The spark in his eyes, his laughter, his courage to feel again. He had spent weeks obsessed with answers, with physical healing. And now he saw it clearly. Liam wasn't coming back because someone fixed him, but because someone welcomed him. Because he was seen, heard, respected, and, at that exact moment, Cole understood, the one who had been truly blind all this time, was him. Cole returned to the community center the following week, but this time not as a parent. He brought an ophthalmology kit, set up a small corner lit by natural light, and asked permission to examine some of the children. Isaiah just smiled and said, "It's your house, doctor." But there, among cardboard signs and handmade posters, Cole wasn't the doctor anymore. He was just a man trying to quietly repair the damage caused by what he once refused to see. He began going every Saturday, even when Liam no longer needed him there. He did eye exams, answered questions, explained things with a patience he once didn't have. Over time, the children began approaching him without fear. And Cole, who once avoided hugs outside his home, now found himself surrounded by tiny hands holding his fingers, offering drawings, sharing stories. He never directly apologized to Isaiah, but the boy understood. The gesture was already the message. The eyes already spoke. And one day, after seeing a long line of little patients, Cole removed his reading glasses, looked around and said, "I think this is the only place where I don't feel blind." Isaiah chuckled softly. He didn't say anything, just gave Cole a light pat on the back, like someone who finally says, "Now you've arrived." It was late afternoon when Cole arrived at the center for the 30th time. Golden sunlight poured through, the wide windows dancing across the cement floor like it was celebrating something unseen. Children ran through the yard, laughter echoed from the corners. And in the back, Isaiah was speaking with a new boy, curled up in the corner, eyes down, spirit heavy. The same look Cole had once seen in Liam. Then he stepped forward, placed his case on the floor, and sat down beside them. Isaiah didn't say a word. He just looked at Cole with that same peaceful gaze. And after a moment Cole said, "Thank you for seeing what I couldn't." Isaiah smiled. Soft, simple. "Some things, doctor, you can only see with your heart." And in that moment, with no applause, no audience, the world changed. A man healed from a blindness that had never been in his eyes. And a 13-year-old black boy proved once again that light lives where you least expect it. And what if it were you in his place, not the doctor, but the boy, ignored, dismissed, underestimated? Just because you don't dress the way they expect, don't speak how they expect, don't come from where they expect. How many times have we turned away from someone who could have taught us something, or worse, how many times have we been cold, thinking we know everything, judging without listening, seeing the world only through the lens of our own ego? This story isn't just about a boy who helped another boy see again. It's about how many times we're the ones who are blind and don't even realize it. Now tell me, what would you have done in the doctor's place? What would you have done in the boys? If this story made you think, or moved you in any way, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep building this community that fights prejudice. Share this with a friend so this light can reach even further. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the real-life stories we'll keep telling here every couple of days. Because here, we don't just tell stories.